A father was passing by his son's room, and he had to stop and take a second look. The bed was made. There was nothing laying on the floor. It was all sparkling and clean. He couldn't understand it. It was organized. And then as he scanned the room one more time, he noticed an envelope, and it said, "Dad." Now, this was unusual and strange, and he wasn't quite sure how to do it, but he went over and he grabbed the envelope and he tore it open and he began to read what his son had said to him. "Dear Dad, it is with great regret and sorrow that I am writing you. I had to elope with my new girlfriend because I wanted to avoid a scene with Mom and you. I have found real passion with Stacy, and she is so nice. But I knew you would not approve of her because of all her piercings, tattoos, tight motorcycle clothes, and the fact that she's much older than me. But it's not only the passion that I have towards her, Dad, it's that she's pregnant. Stacy says, however, that we'll be very happy. She owns a trailer in the woods, and we have lots of wood stacked up that'll keep us warm through the winter. And we share the dream of having many more children, Dad. But Stacy has opened my eyes to the fact that marijuana doesn't really hurt anyone at all. And we'll be growing marijuana for ourselves and to make money and to trade with other people living nearby for cocaine and ecstasy. In the meantime, we'll be praying that science will find a cure for AIDS because Stacy needs to get better. She really deserves it. Don't worry, Dad. I'm 15 and I know how to take care of myself. Someday, I'm sure that we will be back to visit so that you can get to know your grandchildren. Love you, your son John. P.S. Dad, none of the above is true. I'm over at Tommy's house. P.S.S. I just wanted to remind you that there were worse things in life than a school report card that's in my center desk drawer. I love you. Call me when it's safe to come home. Indeed, today is Father's Day. It is that brief period each year that we pause and celebrate the men who encourage us, that fed us, that guided us, and loved us. It is a moment in time when we express maybe what we have failed or forgotten to, or we're afraid to tell the man that has made our life possible. I was one of the fortunate ones. I had an incredible relationship with my dad, especially as an adult. As I reflected on the journey we shared, I have come to realize that I patterned my life after him. Born in 1915, he was the oldest of 4 children. And when the Depression hit in 1929, his family lost their farm. And at 14, my dad began a series of odd jobs that helped to support his family. Clarence Cleland once said, "My father didn't tell me how to live. He lived, and let me watch him do it." I believe that our parents, in the process of creating our foundation in life, established the core principles that each of us carries forward into all of our relationships in life. Our parents do that by being an example to live by. And all of us who were alive in the 1970s will remember the song, "The Cat in the Cradle." And the very last verse states, "And as I hung up the phone, it had occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me." We learn by example. And today I'd like to share with you a few of the core principles that my dad lived by. If we had all day, I could share them all with you, but here instead are just a few that I want to share. The number one focus of my dad's life was God and his faith. Dad was not a religious scientist. However, I think he believed as we do. I am reminded of Fillmore's definition of God in the revealing word. God is personal to us when we recognize him within us as our indwelling life, intelligence, love, and power. It would probably be better to speak of God individualized in man, in the universal identification of ourselves with him, that we come into the God consciousness. God is that from which all love springs. Dr. Holmes, our founder, tells us the measure of our faith is the infinite, in the infinite is the measure of our capacity to draw from the infinite. This is why the great teacher said, "It is done unto you as you believe." If we can believe in the great good, then much good can come to us. It is according to our mental acceptance or mental equivalence, according to our faith, that life manifests itself through us. And my dad believed that everything was always going to be all right if we just trusted the divine. Every time you and I are forced to face our fears, our faith is deepened. Our spiritual journey through life is about deepening our faith. Everything in our life depends upon our beliefs and our faith. It is not easy to believe in something we cannot see, cannot touch, or feel. But it is our faith and belief in the divine being that is always responsible for all of our demonstrations in life. Family meant everything to my dad. As the oldest child, he took great pride and responsibility in regularly reaching out to his siblings after their dad was killed in the 1930s. He was always communicating with cousins and aunts and uncles and extended family members. Often I heard from cousins how Dad called them regularly to check on them. He was still doing that a couple of weeks before his transition. He especially called those who had lost their parents and grandparents. He didn't want anyone to feel alone or excluded. Charles Fillmore tells us, if God is the Father of all, then all men and women are brothers and sisters in a universal family. In the Christ consciousness, we are all one. To a certain degree, that can sometimes be a tough pill to swallow. But let us remember our oneness as we prepare to enter another political season. It is so easy to forget that we are one family when we sort ourselves by political affiliations. Don't forget to reach out to someone you haven't talked to recently. At my father's memorial service, many people spoke of his kindness. Not long before he passed, even though I knew the story, I loved to hear him tell. I'd ask him again how he had learned to be so kind. And he promptly replied, "Why, Grandfather Leventon." He adored his grandfather. He told me many a time how he learned many things as they would work their fields in the farm. And one day he was walking down the street with his grandfather as they were going to the grain store to buy seed for the farm. And a girl passed them by and acknowledged my father, and she was one of their classmates. My dad ignored her, even though she had acknowledged him. Grandfather Leventon grabbed him and jerked him around and immediately said to him, "Why didn't you acknowledge her? Why didn't you say hello to that girl?" "Oh, she's fat and she's ugly and got zits all over her face and nobody likes her." And to that, my grandfather Leventon replied, It doesn't cost you anything to be kind and friendly. He would often remind me that my hello and my smile would be the only acknowledgement that an individual received each day. Henry James told us at the beginning of the 20th century, 3 things in human life are important. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. The third is to be kind. A recent article in Psychology Today tells us we remember kindness too. Its trails of goodwill echoes through our memory banks like sweet perfume long after the moment has passed. Kindness moves us, it nourishes us and heals and strengthens and uplifts. A smile, a touch of kindness can crack open the most rugged of hearts and unclench the tightest of fists. It has been hailed by poets and philosophers and spiritual leaders as a gift, a religion, a language audible to the deaf and visible to the blind, a weapon to fight evil and mankind's greatest delight. And now science is showing just why the accolades ring true. Kindness feeds and boosts the well-being of the giver as well as the receiver. In order to be kind to others, we must first begin by being self-compassionate. The traits of a kind person are many according to recent research. They include good listener, patient. They give without expecting anything in return. They are honest. They show love easily and effortlessly, and they always express gratitude. Scott Adams once said, "Remember, there is no such thing as a small act of kindness. Each act creates a ripple with no logical end." Indeed, our simple acts of kindness multiply over and over and over again like the pebble in a pond. Just imagine what it would be like if everybody paid it forward with one act of kindness each day. Always think, my dad used to say, what would you want or need? And then do it for others. The Science of Mind text tells us to learn. How to think is to learn how to live, for our thoughts go into a medium that is infinite in its ability to be and to do. Man is using a power which is infinite as compared with the power of his conscious thought. Dad was a lifelong learner, and he encouraged others to be the same. Learning and mentally growing began for an early age for me. When I was 3, we lived at 511 Pine Street here in Chico, and there were 3 houses that shared a common fence, and the men got together a couple of weekends that one summer to build a new fence. Well, the old boards became my creative projects. I used Dad's tools to make boats and planes and cars and boxes and any other thing that I thought was conceivable. Almost every day I'd ask him for another sack of nails. You see, he worked for Diamond Match. He never ever tried to tell me how I wasn't doing it right, but always praised my latest creation and encouraged me to learn to use even more of his tools. While learning is an individual process, it is made far easier when we are encouraged, praised, and our environment inspires us. I look back at those primitive creations that I made and I chuckle now. I wish I had a few pictures of them. They were pretty bad, however, but they taught me responsibility and how to clean up, to make sure Dad's tools got back to the right place. Dad always taught me 1 or 2 new things with each time I created something, and I was excited each time I tried to make something new. Encouragement, praise, and understanding are certainly attributes we can use to help develop emotional, spiritual, and mental growth, regardless of a person's age. Always bring your sense of humor and be willing to laugh at yourself. My dad always had a good joke to tell and had a very quick wit about him. After he'd tell a good story, he'd respond with one of his zingers. He'd sit back and quietly smile. He was always willing to laugh at himself as well, something I think all of us need to do more. And if anyone ever doubted that his clean humor was appropriate at that moment in time, he would remind them that Jesus used his sense of humor regularly. Jesus was not always serious during his life on earth. He lived a life knowing that there was a proper time for everything, including humor. We need to only look at Ecclesiastes 3:4, where it states, "There is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance." Jesus used a bit of sarcasm and a bunch of good-natured humor when he picked his 12 disciples. In the book of Mark, he jokingly renamed James and John, who were brothers, with the title Boanerges. This nickname means sons of thunder or sons of commotion. It was no doubt given as a humorous recognition of their sometimes misplaced and impulsive behavior, as well as their over-the-top zeal for what he was teaching. Or how about Luke 6:41? In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus exercised the humor when he stated, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but pay no attention to the log in your own eye? First take the log out of your eye." A healthy sense of humor is good for all of us. After all, laughter gets those healing endorphins moving within. Dad believed it was our job to be of service. He regularly volunteered for committee work in all organizations he belonged to. For Kiwanis Club, he was president. He was the vice chair of the City of Chico Planning Commission. He served as Little and Big Sirs of Sirs Branch 63 and also was treasurer of the Salvation Army Advisory Board. He would always remind both my brother and I that what you put out is what you get back. And he encouraged us to volunteer and help others, since you never knew when you might be on the receiving end. Since after all, service is a part of kindness. I think Michael Beckwith said it best. You are here to serve the great law of life. You are in fact in service to the supreme creative idea that proliferates our environment. It is the life of God that is thinking through your mind, working through your hands, walking through your feet. It does the work appointed for you to do and perfects that which concerns you when you no longer work for the little self, but serve the greater self of your being and the universe. Remember, the only way that God can experience life is through each and every one of us, and there is no greater way to make it happen than through service. There was a new father who shared the experience of a pickle jar in his life. As far back as he could remember, he would walk into his parents' bedroom and see a pickle jar at the end of the dresser. And every night when his father came home, he went and got ready for bed, he would take off his pants, but before he did, he reached into his pocket and would empty the change, into the pickle jar. Now the son loved to look at that pickle jar, especially when the sun came through the window and he saw the sparkle of the coins that were located in that pickle jar. And the father made rolling the money when the pickle jar was full a regular task or a chore. It was a production. He would take the jar to the dining room table and lay out the coins and sort them through and roll them up and put them in order within a box. And then he would take his son, Tom, with him to take them to the bank. Because he would always say, those coins are going to keep you out of the textile mill, son. You're going to do better than me. This old mill town is not where you want to stay. And each and every time that they would go to the bank after driving in the car with that box full of coins between them in his dad's old truck, his father would walk proudly into the bank and slide the box across the counter and say, this is my son's college money. He's going to go to college. He's not going to be like me. And afterwards, they'd go out to celebrate for a couple of ice cream cones, and his dad would always accept the change, and he'd show it to his son and point to it and say, this is your future. This is your college. And his son was thrilled as he got home and he got to put the coins in that pickle jar. And sure enough, Tom was able to ultimately go to college. And when he came home one day, he noticed that the pickle jar was no longer sitting next to the dresser. And he got a lump in his throat, kind of wondering why. But then he understood. And soon Tom got married and he had a daughter of his own, and they came home for the holidays that year. And as the new grandparents were sitting there playing with Jessica on the couch, she started to fuss. And Susan, Tom's wife, took her and said, she needs to be changed. And she walked into the bedroom and she changed it. And when she came out, her eyes were a little misty. And she gave Jessica to the grandparents. And she grabbed Tom's hand and she walked him into the bedroom. And they both looked where the pickle jar had once stood. And there it was once again, filled with coins for Jessica. His father had slipped silently into the bedroom. Neither Tom nor his father said anything at all to each other. They both knew that had been his father's example of love in a simple pickle jar. Love doesn't need any words. Some of us have had fathers, others have had stepfathers, or maybe it was an uncle or a coach, a family friend, a teacher, someone who was a special father figure to you. Whoever it was, living or deceased, on this sacred day of celebrating fathers, remember to share love and the gratitude with those who have made your journey easier and love-filled. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours. And so it is.